everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and please do enjoy the food. And I think L&B even brought T-shirts, which you should
I got surprises for everybody.
It's worth waiting for L&B and their food and their T-shirts. I could write another book called Waiting for L&B, but it's worth it. It's such an honor to be here tonight at the Strand bookstore in Manhattan. I mean, even though we are a Brooklyn-centric book, more than anything, Brooklyn Chef's Table is a love letter to the evolution of New York City food in general. Manhattan is a big part in that, and places like the Strand have really helped shape what New York City is and the New York City way of life. So being here with our book is a really wonderful, wonderful thing. Being that Brooklyn Chef's Table really examines the evolution of the borough's diverse dining scene through the stories of and the recipes of 60 really influential restaurants. I was excited to be able to assemble a very diverse panel of those restaurants for you today. So I hope you will help me give a very warm welcome to Josh Sharkey of Bark Hot Dogs. In Park Slope, but soon enough to be also in Bleecker. Manhattan's getting their very own Bark, so you'll get some of his delicious, locally sourced hot dogs and house-made sauerkraut soon enough. Lenny Kern from L&B Spumoni Gardens in Gravesend.
Looking chubby.
Yeah. We have Jimmy Kokotas from Tom's Restaurant in Prospect Heights and also Tom's in Coney Island. They recently expanded out to that amazing neighborhood, Coney Island. Elise Rosenberg from Colonie in Brooklyn Heights and Gran Electrica in Dumbo. Thank you for being here, Elise. And Dave Carrell from People's Puffs, which is a fixture of Smorgasburg, but it also has a brick and mortar in Park Slope. And he also brought one of his co-owners and friend, Joel Horowitz, who is also here. Thank you for being here, Joel. If Dave flounders on any of the questions, we'll throw it out to you, okay? All right, so I am going to start with Lenny. I hope you don't mind if I throw the first one to you. So you've actually been a real driving force in keeping up with the times and moving L&B into the future, which started with a full-on restaurant that you opened there in the 70s. L&B is, people think of L&B as, of course, for its spumoni and for its square pizza, but there's also a really incredible restaurant. The recipes in the book are all from that restaurant. So how else have you really attempted to acclimate to the changing times and changing tastes and a changing neighborhood, really?
Well, I noticed that in the L&B that we were the dark horse of the L&B. In other words, we had to compete with that Munster pizza and the spumoni that's fabulous and very famous. So I was that guy that was at the end and I said, you know what, how do I get them to notice me and not just come here for the pizza and the spumoni? And I says every day I would locally shop, get a different item every day, like a fish, a meat, a pasta, and I would study all night, trying to come up with a menu, a dish that people would say, wow, that's a great restaurant too. They don't just go to L&B for pizza. And I would study every night. And I noticed that the people were so afraid to try something different. No, they would come, our customers would come and have like a chicken parmesan and have chicken parmesan for 10 years straight. And I would come over and I would make, let's say, one of my famous pear salads. I would go to the tables, look around, see couples sitting there not knowing, coming their first time. And I would say, you know what, I'm going to put one on the table for free from me. And I would introduce the new plates and new dishes by giving to the people at the table. And it took me a month, but after a month, everybody loved the pear salad. And I said, you know what? I started doing with everything. And I noticed that if you were kind and generous, and you really showed them that you weren't trying to sell them, you were really, it was really important to you to make sure that they really loved what they had here, they took to it. And I think our restaurant took off. Our restaurant was like really lagging behind the L&B. We were like a third the sales. Now, my sales are comparable to the pizza and the ice cream combined. There's nobody cooks anymore. Everybody wants to go out to dinner. And I think L&B is one of the dining spots now in Brooklyn, the premier. And I hope every day to keep it that way.
Well,
as long as I try.
On the other hand, though, people feel a real sense of nostalgia for places like L&B. So how do you toe the line between reinventing and really trying to push your customers' palates and still appealing to what they know L&B for and come to L&B for?
Well, what I do is this. Let's say, like I have in the book, I have a Sardinian style shrimp with the Marsala wine, and most customers know Vera Marsala, chicken Marsala. But has anybody ever heard of Sardinian style Marsala shrimp? No, not really. So I would come up with a Marsala dish, but something totally different. I would put an egg batter on the shrimp. I would get a roasted zucchini and put that squared off on the dish, and come up with different, like maybe zucchini blossoms around the side of the dish and decorate it. And the people were like, they really took notice. Like, it wasn't just that plain chicken or veal on the dish. It was something extraordinary, and they were willing to try it. And I think I try every day. I look different magazines every night. I watch shows, much shows I possibly could. And I use my suppliers. That's very important. Ask your suppliers what's in season and what's fresh, and try to work with the locally fresh, in-season products. And I think the people really do appreciate it, and I hope that they do.
When we spoke in preparation for this book, you quoted the song lyric, "You got to be in with the in crowd."
That's right.
So why do you think, why now is Brooklyn, I mean, a Brooklynite like me thinks it's always been the in crowd, but why now is the larger New York City and the world in general really looking at Brooklyn as the in crowd?
Sometimes at night I talk to some of the customers, they look like they're tourists. Where are you from? I tell them, oh, I'm from Argentina. Where are you from? I'm from England. And I notice that they're very bored with that extravagant, high-priced, Manhattan-style, I call them tablecloth restaurants. They're bored with them. They go there, they spend $400. They weren't really happy. They didn't really get full. And it wasn't something they would go back to England or Argentina and say, wow, I went to Le Bernardine. No, they don't. They want to brag how much they spent. Did you really enjoy it? I, in my heart, say, you know what? Let's make Brooklyn that dining destination that's different. It doesn't have to be very expensive, but it has to be great. I want to make a memory that you'll go back to England. You know what? I really enjoyed the L&B. I loved Lenny. He was kind. He was generous. They tell their friends, and they talk. I've had people meet me and tell me that their friends recommended L&B from London. And I was like, really? And they would tell me a story. I was like, I was proud. I can't believe that they're not going back to England talking about Le Bernardine. They're talking about L&B. And I said, you know what? I'm doing something right. And I pray to God every day that they all do find us that way.
Well, Josh, you actually came from that world of, tablecloth dining, right? So when you sought to branch out, do your own venture, how did you end up A, in Brooklyn, and B, doing hot dogs, which is kind of as I don't want to say low rent, but it's not white tablecloth food.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I lived in Park Slope long before I opened Bark, and I worked in Manhattan my whole professional career. And what I noticed living in Park Slope is that there was, and also just in general in a lot of similar communities, that there wasn't that happy medium of food, of the approach that we take in fine dining to using really amazing ingredients and treating them with care and making sure that everybody around you treats them with care and treats them with integrity. Why can't we do that with something as simple as a hot dog? And to be honest, when I started Bark, hot dogs wasn't even the original concept. It was chicken wings. And really, for me, the concept is not hot dogs. It's more the approach to food. It could be hot dogs or burgers or wings or whatever it is that we make. We make sure that we, one, use amazing ingredients. That two, we know who we're buying from, which is just as important. That I can call someone and say, hey, either hey, I really love this broccoli this week, or why is it drier today? What happened? And I think that it's something that not just in Brooklyn but in America, now I think we're learning more and more, but that we really want to change the perception of quote fast food, because it doesn't have to be mass produced. It can be transparent, and to be honest, for me, this was more of a food is my life, and I've been cooking since I can't remember, and I'll always love being a chef, but for me, Bark was just as much a social venture to sort of change people's perception of what really great fast food can be. And we see it every day with kids coming in that have been coming for 5 years, and I see these kids that 4 years ago they were just sort of learning what compost was and what organic meat was, and now these kids are experts, and they come in with their parents, and they're like, "No, mommy, that goes in the recycling, not the compost." And
that's Park Slope for you. You set up in a good neighborhood for that.
That's Park Slope.
Well, you did, even though the original idea was chicken wings, you did go with hot dogs, which are an iconically Brooklyn food, and people tend to have a lot of rules about what does and doesn't belong on a hot dog. So, do you have rules yourself as you know, ketchup has no place on a hot dog?
You
like a
know,
lot of people would say?
I think the one thing I've learned, you know, coming from fine dining, you're sort of the customer's in your hands, and you know, you sort of determine what they're going to eat. This is the sauce, you know, this is the garnish. But you know, in this atmosphere and with Bark, the customer is the expert, and I have no place telling you what you should or shouldn't put on your hot dog. And if you like ketchup, great. If you like barbecue sauce, great. Maybe, you know, now we'll start making barbecue sauce. You know, if you know, it's really about, hot dog is one of those things that is very personal, and everybody eats it a certain way. And you know, one thing that we've learned is that you have to let people sort of have their own experience with it, and we try and let that happen as much as possible.
So what are some ways in which you really try to stay true to like the classic dog, and how are you really pushing the envelope and taking it into the future?
Well, you know, what we do really is take very, very traditional, classic American condiments or toppings or just dishes such as baked beans. And you know, with Bark, the one thing that I will never ever do is try to do something that's a gimmick or a trend. You know, we stay as traditional as possible. So if we're gonna make baked beans, I'm gonna find the best heirloom bean I can from a farmer that I know I can trust, and also be able to get enough beans that we can make as many as we do. And then, you know, take the idea of baked beans and just use really great bacon. You know, use the right seasoning, and make sure we spend the time to season it properly, and have the perfect version of a baked bean, or the perfect version of sauerkraut. You know, instead of a canned sauerkraut with preservatives and sodium benzenate, you know, a barrel, cabbage, and thyme, and salt. So really, what we try to do is just keep things as simple and as classic as possible.
Jimmy, the diner obviously is a real integral part to Brooklyn life. How do you see the diner both shaping and interacting with the community? And your diner is a fixture. Your diner has been around for, is it 70, 60 years, the Prospect Heights one? 70 years. So what role do you see your diner playing in that neighborhood?
I think that obviously there's been an evolution of the diner. The diner was the original. We started off as a coffee shop. So some people call us a restaurant, some people call us a diner. I'm not sure what the difference is of the two. Everybody's got their own way of describing one or the other. But we were the original coffee shop, luncheonette, ice cream parlor before that with a candy counter, because back then there weren't bakeries in every corner. People would stop and buy boxes of chocolate to bring to somebody's house when they were going to visit. We've been the place for people to go and hang out and get familiar with each other and just get a bite to eat for many years. I think we're probably working on, I'm the third generation, but I know that there are at least, I think there are families that have been in the place for 4 or 5 coming in to eat. So people that were at the upper end of the spectrum in the 30s and 40s, and now great-grandchildren coming into the restaurant, eating breakfast, the same place where they heard stories about great-grandma and grandpa eating. Just a place where you can feel comfortable. I think that's the most important thing. The diners had their heyday, probably the 70s and 80s, where you saw these big diners popping up everywhere. They're still big out on the island, but I think the boroughs, it's changed. And now you have a lot of smaller restaurants opening up. And as long as they provide a place where you can feel comfortable, they know who you are, they greet you on the way in, they care about your experience there, and it's a pleasant experience for you, I think that the diner doesn't necessarily have to be the only place where you can get that. I think everybody here has gone out of their way, as have the people in the book, to make it a pleasant experience for people. You're not just a customer. The people that are working 60 and 70 hours a week on average, okay, that's an average week, 60 and 70 hours. My father is 69 years old. The last 23 years, he's averaged about 110 hours a week work. Okay, so when they talk about Lou Gehrig, knock wood, he's still doing it. I challenge the younger, the older, anybody else who wants to go for it to try it. If your heart's in it and you do it for the right reason, and we're not, even in Coney Island, for us now, we're trying to make it a place for you to go and eat. We're not trying to treat people like tourists. which is what usually happens in a lot of places. If you go here in the city, if you go to Times Square, some of these streets, it's unfortunate that they're probably making a lot more money than we are, but it's because it's just a constant turnover. It's just come in, we don't really care if the experience was good or not. Somebody else will walk in 10 seconds later because there's just so much foot traffic. So it's more the approach and the caring. And like I said, it's the diner was then, I think, now it's taking that old school principle of making people feel comfortable, providing them with a good meal, good quality food, and a smile and that's what everybody's doing.
Well, you've also been in a really unique position to watch the neighborhood around you change over the years. So what are you shared with me, and maybe you'll share it again, that incredible story about during the race riots, but what are some pivotal New York City moments that really stood out to you because you had a front row seat?
Yes, well, it was before me, but today we celebrate, Dr. King, and I can tell you that we've been in Prospect Heights before. Some of the older customers refer to Prospect Heights as the 9th Ward, because that's what it was referred to back then from some of the people on the street. It was a good neighborhood, it was a so-so neighborhood, it was a bad neighborhood, it was a dangerous neighborhood. Now it's come full circle again, and Eastern Parkway is the Park Avenue of Brooklyn. With as nice an apartment as you can find anywhere in the city. 10-foot ceilings and 400 square foot living rooms, which is bigger than most people's apartments in Manhattan nowadays. So what we've seen and what my uncle has seen, and again I bring up Dr. King, is by treating people with respect and treating them well and the way you'd like to be treated. I think we were ahead of our times before the race relations that exist today came to fruition. Whether our customers were black, whether they were white, whether they were German, whether they were Jewish, they came in, they paid the same amount of money, so you treated them with respect. You hoped that their experience was a pleasant one. And when Dr. King was assassinated and there was a lot of looting and rioting going on in the city, and especially in Brooklyn, a lot of our customers that were African American lined up and formed a chain outside the front of the restaurant and would not let Tom's be broken into and destroyed. And that was because these people felt, I guess, a genuine respect and love for the place, that they were willing to do this. And I think that comes from you showing them a genuine respect and love. So, like I said, my uncle and his dad were, I think, a little bit ahead of their times, and again, you try to lead by example, and we've been there. We're not trying to be anything that we're not. We're not getting fancy. So the places in Manhattan with the tablecloths and all that other stuff, we're not making French omelets. We're not going to do that. We're an old school coffee shop luncheonette, greasy spoon as some people refer to it. Yes, you might get a little bit of hash brown in your scrambled eggs, but that's because they're made on the grill. They're not made in the fry.
I love that. I'm excited when you get the French fry in your onion rings. I don't know.
As long as it's something that you shouldn't be eating that ends up in your eggs, everything else is kind of okay. So we do our breakfast, we do our pancakes. In Coney Island, we brought breakfast to the boardwalk. We brought a lot of other things that weren't there. On days like today and tomorrow with L&B Snow, we will be open. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to give people a chance when they go to this famous Coney Island boardwalk to be able to have a place to sit down and eat. Where in years past, if you showed up to the boardwalk, which a lot of tourists do, there's nothing there. It's a ghost town after the beginning of November because everything shuts down. We will be trying to fill in all the voids come this summer, or this spring I should say, when we bring seafood back to Coney Island. Our roof deck has been ready for the past year, but we chose not to go too fast and to get our feet wet. We're going to be opening up an oyster bar on the boardwalk in Coney Island. So again, trying to do what we can to make it a pleasant experience. Seafood, the ocean, it kind of goes hand in hand. Killer view. There are not too many other places in the city. A lot of other places in the boroughs that have the views of Manhattan and the buildings and everything. We have the view of the Atlantic Ocean. So it's an endless view, beautiful view, and we hope that people will come out and appreciate it. And hopefully we can continue to do more to bring people to Brooklyn. I know we're in a lot of the international guides, and we have people from all over the world that come in. The best is getting into the competition with the French over the crepe or the pancake. And we just keep trying to do what we've been doing for 3 generations, and old school principles, whether they're always accepted in the beginning, I'm not so sure about, but they definitely are tried and true and have proven to be a winning formula long term. And that's our story.
I'm waiting for that oyster bar. I'll be there.
Good luck.
Well, Elise, obviously Colonie isn't quite as old as Tom's Restaurant, but you have definitely broken new ground for what the restaurant industry is shaping up to be. Obviously, you were the very first restaurant to use Kickstarter to fund the restaurant. So how did you, because it was not even a thing then, so first of all, how did you hear about Kickstarter? How did you get started on Kickstarter? What do you think the draw was? How much did you make out of Kickstarter? Just take us right in there.
All right. I would like to thank a small publication called the New York Times. They wrote an article about Kickstarter and how creative projects, music, books, films, etc., were using Kickstarter and other, crowd-sourced fundraising tactics to raise money for their businesses. And we went right away, and there was a little food section, but it was things like food trucks and cupcake design businesses, and no restaurants. But as everybody at this table can attest to, a restaurant is basically the most creative thing that you can possibly do, from designing it to cooking. You actually said to me earlier today that the restaurant is my theater, which it definitely is. So we shot a little video and wrote this essay and designed everything for the Kickstarter regulations. And we submitted it, and we were super excited, and we were rejected because a restaurant is a commercial project, and Kickstarter is there to fund creative projects. Of course, we disagreed. And we wrote a very strongly worded email discussing about how creative restaurant design is, and how much passion and innovation and intuition goes into cooking and the whole process. And moreover, we were designing an open kitchen, and it really is theater to sit at the kitchen counter and to watch these guys, shout out to Andrew Whitcomb, our chef in the back, prepare their food right in front of you. I mean, you can't get better theater than that, and you get to eat it at the end. I mean, amazing. And so we wrote this strongly worded letter, and it took them, I think, 45 minutes to write back to us and say that's exactly the kind of passion that we're looking for.
Amazing.
Which is great. And now, I mean, every other restaurant.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, obviously, Kickstarter has become incredibly saturated with restaurant requests. So what do you see? I mean, you're not really in the position to necessarily need a crowdfunding site like that, but for young startup businesses, do you see anything coming up that's like Kickstarter that you see as potential sources for these young upstart businesses?
I think that there's a lot of, Kickstarter-like websites these days, and I would absolutely encourage anybody to use Kickstarter, despite its saturation or any of these similar websites, for a few reasons. One, Kickstarter for us wasn't just to raise money; it was a marketing tool, and we were able to. We were under construction, we had the space, we put a little sign on the door saying, Colonie coming soon, check us out on Kickstarter.com. And so it was a way to introduce ourselves to the neighbors who, we were there for. We wanted to be a neighborhood restaurant, we didn't want to be a, dining destination. Of course, if that also happened, that wouldn't be a bad thing either. But we were very much there to give Brooklyn Heights just a great dining option where they would feel comfortable to come in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week. And so we definitely wanted to introduce ourselves to the neighbors. And we also wanted to give our friends and family the opportunity to contribute when, we were raising money from investors on the side, of course, to give us the real money to build the restaurant. But not everybody could afford to give us $10,000. But some people, friends, just really wanted to contribute $50, $10, $75, whatever it is. And then it's a way for people who really support you to be able to support you in another way. And so I think that is why a lot of small projects are successful on Kickstarter, because it's their friends in their real network, outside of their social online network, who just really want to give something and to pitch in and to help. So in that way, it's really, it's online, but it's really just a community-based way for projects to get on their feet, which is great. So highly recommended.
In addition to obviously doing great food, both of your restaurants, Colonie and Gran Electrica, are really known for their like funky, fun interior design, which of course it says a lot about your own personal taste. But would you say, besides the Edison light bulbs and the mason jars, is there like a Brooklyn design aesthetic that's very separate from Manhattan?
I think so. My partners and I were very much influenced by Aberco, who is a really massive design company, and we were all lucky enough to work for them for 7 years at a restaurant called Public. And so, those Edison bulbs, they like started it. But
You had Kickstarter first and the Edison bulbs first. Then.
I'm not going to take credit for that, but thank you. But yeah, I mean, we were very much, we really wanted to use as many sustainable materials and recycled materials and found materials as possible. And I think that's a very Brooklyn aesthetic that, to do no harm. It's not about a big, new, fancy, glitzy restaurant. It's about creating an atmosphere where you feel comfortable. And I think that just naturally, if you have a lot of found materials and a lot of materials that are already used and have that lived-in feel, then you're naturally going to feel very comfortable there. And so that was a major factor in both of the restaurants, to use as many reclaimed materials as possible. And I mean, you find that everywhere.
David, I like to say that Brooklynites have a very special insight into the TV show Portlandia, because the dream of the 1890s is alive here too, in our artisanal popsicles and our pickles and whatnot. So what would you attribute to that real, borough obsession with the handmade and the locally sourced and all those great buzzwords?
Well, I think you mentioned smorgasbord in my introduction, and I think that Brooklyn Flea and smorgasbord and these types of things have a lot to do with me being here today, because it empowered me and gave me the tools to, without a large-scale investment, just go, as I referred to it to you earlier, just go set up a lemonade stand on the corner, but be exposed to people who are opinion makers on a larger scale, and frankly, a large circulation of people. So when you talk about pickling and these kinds of things, these are types of things we might do in our house, and all of a sudden there's an entire group of people who are suddenly empowered to not just do it for themselves or their friends or gifts, but to take it and actually try it in a marketplace. And I've always thought that marketplace is like a good drug, you almost refer to it as theater, being on stage. There's very much that. There's also this direct feedback loop you have with the consumer introducing a new product. So once you kind of get into it, it kind of will get your hooks in you. But in terms of these kind of niche, kind of small products that are just outside of your step, or maybe a hobbyist can do, I feel like these marketplaces and these types of things really empower people to take the next step.
So do you think that, because with the music industry, bands don't necessarily need a big label behind them anymore to be successful. So do you think that places like Smorgasburg, Brooklyn Flea, are changing the face or the trajectory of the young restaurateur and the restaurant scene in general?
I think it might possibly give people a voice that might not have had a voice before. I don't have a culinary background, and now Willy Wonka making popsicles in an abandoned factory in Brooklyn, and that came about not out of some fever dream or something. It came apart through curiosity, through being empowered by tools like this, and ton of work, that's a step that can never be taken out. And yeah, so I mean, for me at least, there was a path that made sense. I kind of had a bit of a background by background, I mean, and since the age of 15, I was just working in the service industry. But I kind of had a background in the service industry, and it was just like a very direct. It was like cutting out the middleman. Like maybe I can just save up a little bit of money, and then all of a sudden I can take my toys and go down here and try it. And it was just there's a sense of empowerment to it.
Well, People's Pops is really, I mean, you are basically the dream, I would imagine, for people coming into places like Smorgasburg. Like, Smorgasburg, people hope, I guess, equals brick and mortar. You were the first really big, successful business to come out of Smorgasburg. But I would assume that for most businesses, not everybody's going to have a brick and mortar, first of all, but I would assume that places like Smorgasburg are not self-supporting. So do you think it's increasingly necessary to take a multi-tiered approach to running a business nowadays? Do you need the stand and you still need the brick and mortar, and do you need to be on the road with a food truck?
I can answer that in two ways, which is through like the 2009 David Carrell and the current one. Because the old one was like, run a lean business, just do it all on your shoulders. You can do it. You can make Smorgasburg, you can make Brooklyn Flea sustain itself and take any profit you have and make it grow another business. But now that I've done it, I want, I kind of had, there is a different way. Like, once you have access to capital, and once the experiments you're taking take on a higher dollar amount, things change. Like, you might want to hire a consultant before you print 200,000 labels, like one of those kinds of things. Like,
Yeah.
I think very much the Flea and the Smorgasburg can, generate itself into its own business. Like, you could stay that size, but if you take the profits and you reinvest it, like, you can grow something awesome. You can have a line of product on Whole Foods shelves, which, the barrier to entry to that seems ridiculous maybe to someone else, but like in reality, it's pretty achievable.
I don't know if do you have time to just ask one more question to the panel?
Yeah, we're running a little, one more and then
Okay.
the audience wants, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's one question that I always like to ask whenever I have audience with food people, is the future of Brooklyn food and where you see it heading? Because a lot of people consider us a trend for one reason or another, and even our fanciest restaurants are nowhere near as tablecloth as Le Bernardin or Daniel. But so what do you see as the future of Brooklyn food? Are we slowly getting remade into Manhattan's image, or is Manhattan about to get remade into our image, or what do you see as the future? And maybe everybody could just contribute a little thought to that. Maybe just go down the line.
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of the product of Brooklyn's food culture actually, I don't want to step my boundaries, but I think a lot of it did come from Manhattan, people that were maybe working in Manhattan and now are opening shop in Brooklyn because, hey, there's a crowd for this, there's a customer base here now. And I think that the future is really that now we do have competition. There's more than one person making pickles, there's more than one person making hot dogs, and the more competition you have, the better things get. And I think that in 10 years Brooklyn will have as many of the best restaurants in New York City as there is in Manhattan, and maybe even more.
I think that at my level of dining at Spumoni Gardens, I've noticed that 20% of our business is take home or prepared foods to take home. And as the years went by, I noticed that families couldn't afford to buy entrees from the menu and feed their families. In other words, if there was a family of 4, the father couldn't afford, or the parents couldn't afford to put down 4 entrees and sodas and salads. So I came up with an idea that I do with in the restaurant, like the chef table, which is like a market menu for the day. And I put a menu for takeout that was family style. I mean, like a family menu to go, meaning that I would give them a tray of salad, a tray of pasta, a tray of chicken, drinks, and prepared breads. And they could afford that way to go. And I think the trend is going to be family cooking to go, and not you calling up your local pizzeria or your local restaurant. No, give me that veal marsala and a Caesar salad. No, I think they're going to start ordering family menus to go. I see some, in my opinion, that trend of family cooking and not individual cooking like entrees to go. And I think that's what at my level of restaurant, I think they should experiment and try to build a better menu to go for the people. I think a lot of people do. A lot of people can't afford to eat out today. And they do. They take it home. They want to feed their family. They want to go that little special night. And this is a way of, my way of giving them that special night and not having to them spend all that money. And I think that's the next new trend, in my opinion.
Jimmy, what do you think?
I think the sky's the limit. I think the scene will continue to grow. The one, I think, thing that bothers me a little bit about what's happening is because Brooklyn is so trendy now that the barrier to get into it is a lot more expensive. If you look at what happened on Smith Street 15, 20 years ago, those were Manhattanites that had the experience, that picked that street to start opening up on. A bunch of restaurants opened up. Now go ask and see what the rent is on Smith Street. I mean, as long as we stay cheaper than Manhattan, things will continue to grow because we'll be the lesser alternative in terms of rent. And the reality is that all the glory that the food business has, a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of planning. Financial stability is really important. A lot of businesses don't make it because they don't have the backing to last for, the year or 2 or 3 that they need. I could tell you that we've been in Coney Island now for a year and a half. It's been tough. It's been tough because it is a seasonal business and the winter time is cruel. I stay open just to not get rid of my employees because I don't want to go through the cycle of hiring and firing and stuff to keep people if you're cooking real food. But again, it's difficult. Financially, it's not that easy, and the more expensive it becomes, I don't think you can open up anything nowadays for under $300,000-$400,000, and that's a hole in the wall. So you could easily spend $200,000-$300,000 in your kitchen. Forget about decorations and everything else. So, but I think the possibilities are endless. I think what's happened in Brooklyn in the last 20 years gives people who want to make a name for themselves, gives them the confidence that they could easily come to Brooklyn, and it's not like people would be like, oh, you're in Brooklyn. It's not looked at like you're the redheaded stepchild. No offense to anybody who's redheaded and a stepchild. But we're not that anymore. We are on top of the culinary map, and I think that people realize that. Sometimes they like it too because I think there's a little bit more attitude in Brooklyn, and that's what differentiates us from, I don't want to say the stuffy shirt Manhattan restaurants, but that does fit. That does fit a lot of the Manhattan restaurants. You can come in looking whichever way you want, and who knows? Maybe it could be like some of the West Coast techies. The guy that you're seeing in your jeans and T-shirt is really worth like $8 billion. So it's going to continue to grow, though. I think it'll continue to grow, and I think Brooklyn has really it's provided a great service to the city. And I think it's helped put a lot of other little small towns, which we are not, but it helped put a lot of other small towns throughout the country on the map because it's given people the backbone to say, something. If I do it and I do it right, it doesn't matter where I do it, people will come. And that combined with the internet has made it all possible.
Awesome. What do you think, Elise?
Yeah, I think the export of the Brooklyn brand is definitely something that we're going to start to see even more domestically and internationally. I think this kind of, because the rents were so cheap, Brooklyn became a place very quickly where people could take more risks because it's cheaper to run a business here. We're actually not in Brooklyn right now. At this table. The Brooklyn table. Because it's cheaper to run a business, and when there's less risk, you can take more risks, and I think that's part of why the spotlight has been shining on Brooklyn so much recently, because you could do something different and be really interesting, and show your style without having to cater to every single person who walks in the door because you're paying $40,000 a month in rent. And I think that style of restaurant is becoming very desirable in other cities. And I've heard it from friends, I've heard it from potential partners, just people coming to us all the time saying, Sweden needs, Stockholm needs more of these Brooklyn-style restaurants, London needs it, Mumbai needs it. And I think it's going to influence the way we dine in every city in the country. And I think within the borders of Brooklyn, I think what Josh said was very much spot on, that the standards are only going to raise and get better as more restaurants come in to more neighborhoods. You're going to have to be a lot better to to survive, which I think is great. I mean, competition makes all of us want to do better. And yeah, did you say stronger?
right.
Stronger.
Brooklyn strong.
I'm gonna leave it with
Competition
that.
strong makes
David, close us out with your pearls of wisdom
Bring
on
it home,
Brooklyn.
David.
Or throw it to Joel, I mean.
No pressure.
Every thing everyone said here was absolutely spot on. I can maybe add my story. I moved across the country in 2004 from Florida to New York, chasing a dream, maybe sold by TV. Growing up, everyone knows New York. Everyone knows what it is. I came here, I hit the ground, and I live in a small apartment and do something that on paper is creative, but in reality sucks the life out of you. And I found Brooklyn. And I like I mentioned earlier, my kitchen is in the abandoned Pfizer building, and that's kind of like that weird image you're sold of New York moving across the country, of this place with like canvas and like you can do and creative people and people working together towards these things. And I found it, and I like it. And in terms of moving forward, it's interesting with the Brooklyn Flea. I remember doing one of these with Eric Denby, the guy who started the Brooklyn Flea, and he commented that his original vision was that people would start businesses and move on. And now people have started businesses, very successful, thriving businesses, but are still at the Brooklyn Flea. So it does kind of, I don't know if that's good, that's bad, but I think it's awesome. And I know myself, what I'm able to create, kind of going forward to pay that forward is we offer kitchen incubators, we offer real estate incubators, because when we first signed our first lease, we did it in, 2009, when there was like real estate was everywhere. I remember it was like walking through the East Village looking for a store to open up was like that first go round on the Monopoly board. It was like, should I take this place? No, should I take this place? It's not like that anymore, but now we have enough money to sign 5-7 year leases, and whereas we don't sit on it during the winter. We are you started by selling ice cream, we're a very highly seasonal thing, so now we turn it over to other people, and we try to be able to be what the Brooklyn Flea was like to us in the original, with kitchen incubators and even pop-up store incubators.
You guys are so awesome. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what's in the book. We got to share these similar stories with 60 restaurants. These guys are at your disposal. If you have some books you want them to give a little autograph. They brought some amazing food. Please enjoy the food. I don't know if we have time for audience questions. You tell us.
Yeah, unfortunately we're really low on time, but you can ask questions while eating food and getting books
Grab
signed. We have some
food, get your book
copies of the book
signed,
in the
ask some
back.
questions, get a L&B t-shirt. What?
I have a question for Sarah.
Oh, oh no.
This book was a phenomenal experience. It was something that I had listened to the past, things that seem to be the common denominator. I'm wondering if you got, I guess it's kind of a comment as well as a question. I saw passion and I saw challenge. Like when Lenny was saying about he was up against pizzeria, which was established for many years already. He had built a restaurant. He had passion. He was challenged. He was successful. When he had the hot dog, the wings, the hot dogs, and I was talking about getting the best beans to put on his hot dog. Passion, challenge, and taking a restaurant like a diner with Lisa's Food, bringing it to Colonie on the boardwalk. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of passion, and a lot of challenge. And all these people, to me, had the same type of look at them. The outlook was the same. And did you find that when you were doing the book?
I absolutely did, and I'm glad that you got that just from this panel discussion. I hope it comes through in the book. Again, like Brooklyn restaurants are chock-a-block, and I probably could have written, a million different versions of this book, but I feel so happy with the 60 that we gathered for this, because they could be as different as a popsicle stand at Smorgasburg or a 70-year-old like red sauce place, but they're people with the same passion, and I think they have very similar stories, and I respect all of their business models. Some are new, some are old, but I think that together, I tried to view them all as, puzzle pieces that when put together, they start to tell the greater story of the Brooklyn food scene and what makes it special. So I'm excited that you saw that. Thank you for your comments.
Thanks to Sarah and to all of our panelists
Thank
for
you,
having us
guys.
tonight. Thanks to all